There's a moment that happens to almost everyone, quietly, usually late at night. You're lying there, replaying a conversation, and a sentence forms in your mind that you've never said out loud before. Was any of it even real, or did I build this person myself? Carl Jung spent his life studying exactly that question. Not why people hurt us, why we're so shocked when they do, because the human mind doesn't just meet people. Music, it finishes them. You get 20 minutes of evidence, and your imagination writes the other 90% for free. You meet confidence, and your mind assumes loyalty. You meet charm, and your mind assumes depth. Someone listens to you carefully once, and by the following week you've built an entire future with them in your head. Not because you're foolish. Because that's simply what the mind does. It doesn't tolerate blanks. It fills them in and forgets it did. Most people are not in relationships with other people. Music, they are in relationships with a draft. And this is the story of what happens the day that draft finally collapses. Think of the last person who disappointed you badly enough to keep you up at night. Really think of them. In the moment, you weren't only angry, you were confused. That's not who they are, you kept thinking. That's not the person I know. Here's the part Jung would want you to sit with. The person you knew was never fully them. It was half memory, half hope, stitched together and mistaken for a fact. And when reality doesn't match the stitching, the mind never says I built the wrong picture. It says they changed. It says they betrayed me. Anything except the one sentence that's actually true. Music, I filled in blanks I had no right to fill in. You felt this before, you just didn't have the words for it. Now you do. Once you see it once, you start seeing it everywhere. The coworker who's warm to your face on Monday and cold by Thursday, the moment you stop being useful to them. The friend who's generous in the group chat and distant the second it's just the two of you. The partner who says they value honesty and goes quiet the moment you're actually honest with them. None of them think of themselves as dishonest. That's the part that's hard to hear. Almost nobody decides consciously to wear a mask. They just get comfortable in whichever version of themselves gets the warmest reaction, and slowly forget there was ever another version underneath. Jung had a word for what gets left out of that version. Music, he called it the shadow. Everything that doesn't fit the story a person has decided to tell about themselves. Their jealousy, their need for control, their fear of being ordinary. Nobody displays the shadow on purpose. It leaks instead, in a tone that's slightly too sharp, in a joke that isn't really a joke, in warmth that vanishes the instant you stop being convenient. And the people most convinced of their own goodness are often the ones with the least contact with their own shadow. Not because they're worse people. Because the less someone examines their own darkness, the more freely it operates without asking permission. This is usually where people look away. Because once you notice the pattern in others, it becomes impossible not to notice it in yourself. The flicker of satisfaction when someone who hurt you struggles later. Music, the silence you choose instead of honesty, because honesty might cost you something. The confidence you perform, because the version of you that seems fragile gets treated worse than the version that seems fine. That's not a flaw unique to you. That's the shadow, operating exactly the way it always operates, underneath the story you tell about who you are. Jung's real point was never watch out, other people are wearing masks. His real point was sharper than that. You are wearing one too. The goal was never to catch other people in the act. It was to notice your own hand doing it. And this is usually where relationships start revealing what they were actually built on. Because a lot of relationships aren't built on love the way people assume. They're built on an arrangement neither person ever said out loud. I'll make you feel important if you make me feel needed. I'll be your audience if you're my safety net. I'll tolerate your coldness if you keep choosing me over everyone else. Nobody signs that contract on purpose. It gets negotiated in silence, one small exchange at a time, until it feels like identity instead of agreement. Music which is exactly why it's so disorienting when it breaks. The other person didn't become someone new. The unspoken terms changed, and the mask that depended on those terms had nothing left to hold it up. You can watch this happen in real time, whenever someone changes roles. The quiet coworker finally says no in a meeting, and the room doesn't feel proud, it feels annoyed. Music, the friend who used to need rescuing starts healing without anyone's help, and the friends who loved rescuing them go strangely cold. The partner who's always apologized first stops apologizing, and suddenly they're different. Suddenly they're not who they used to be. Growth doesn't just change you. It changes what you're worth to the people who benefited from the old version of you. That's not always malice. Sometimes it's grief wearing the costume of anger, because someone they relied on stopped being available in the old, familiar way. But sometimes, it is exactly what it looks like. There's a particular silence that shows up after you understand this. Not sadness exactly, more like static finally clearing. You start listening differently, less to what people say, more to what they repeat. Music, because Jung believed people don't reveal themselves in a single moment. They reveal themselves in pattern. One unkind comment could be a bad day. A pattern of unkindness that always arrives right after you succeed, that's not a bad day. That's a signature. You start noticing who only texts during a crisis. Music who compliments you and somehow makes you feel smaller in the same sentence. Who goes quiet the moment you stop being impressed by them. None of this happens in one dramatic confrontation. It accumulates, quietly, until the day you're not shocked anymore. You're just certain. And certainty feels lonelier than confusion did. Nobody warns you about that part. Here's the sentence that tends to sit the longest once people hear it. Most relationships don't end when respect disappears. Music, they end months later when you finally notice it already had. Before that, most people don't leave. They translate. They're just stressed. They didn't mean it. That's just how they show love. Translation is how the mind protects the fantasy a little longer, because losing the fantasy feels like losing the person, even when the fantasy was never really them to begin with. Denial isn't stupidity. Music is often the kindest thing a person's mind knows how to do for them, at a cost they can't see yet. It's what keeps families quiet at dinner. It's what keeps someone replying to messages that make them smaller every time. It's what keeps a friendship alive a decade past its expiration date, on nothing but habit and hope. And the moment denial cracks, even slightly, everything downstream starts looking different. Music, compliments start sounding like transactions. Affection starts sounding conditional. Somebody's "I'm proud of you" starts sounding like "I'm proud of what your success does for me." And a question starts forming that's very hard to unthink once it exists. What did I mistake for love, simply because I was afraid of being alone? This is usually where a video like this turns cold, where the lesson becomes trust no one, expect the worst, protect yourself at all costs. Plenty of people land there. It feels safe. It feels like intelligence. It isn't. Music, cynicism is just romanticism wearing a disguise. It's still a story about people, just a darker one, still oversimplified, still missing what a person actually is. A cynic hasn't learned to see people clearly. They've just traded one flattering fiction for one convenient one. The real place Jung was pointing toward isn't distrust, it's precision. Music, seeing someone exactly as they are, capable of warmth and self-interest in the same conversation, capable of loyalty and fear in the same relationship, capable of love and convenience, tangled so tightly together that even they can't always tell the two apart. That's a much harder thing to hold than good person or bad person, but it's the only version that's actually true. And once you can hold that complexity in other people, something has to happen to how you see yourself too. Because if everyone is a mixture, not a mask hiding a monster, not a hero hiding a secret, then so are you. The jealousy you've never said out loud, The times you went cold to protect yourself instead of staying honest. The strength you performed because vulnerability had cost you before, and you weren't willing to pay that price twice. None of that makes you a fraud. It makes you a full person, and full people have rooms they haven't opened yet. The people Jung warned about most were never the openly difficult ones. They were the ones utterly convinced of their own innocence, because a person who has never questioned their own darkness is the one most likely to act on it and call it something else. Cruelty becomes honesty. Control becomes love. Jealousy becomes concern. The mind is remarkably skilled at translating its own worst impulses into something defensible, especially to itself. Self-awareness doesn't make you perfect. It makes you accountable. Those are two very different things. Only one of them is actually available to us. So what does the other side of all this seeing actually feel like? Because it's fair to ask. After all this pattern recognition, all this quiet dismantling of illusions, what's left standing? Not less connection, music, different connection. You stop needing people to be flawless to stay close to them. You start noticing effort instead of performance. You get slower to trust completely, but when you do, it's built on evidence instead of hope, which makes it sturdier, not weaker. You stop being hypnotized by charm on first contact, because you've learned charm is often just the fastest mask, not the deepest thing about a person. Loneliness changes shape too. It stops being about how many people are around you and starts being about how many of them have actually seen the real one, shadow included. Not the easy, agreeable, emotionally convenient version you learned to perform, because it got you accepted faster. Jung once wrote that until a person makes the unconscious conscious, it will direct their life and they will call it. Most people live their entire lives inside that sentence without ever hearing it. They think they keep meeting the same kind of person by accident. They think their patterns are bad luck. They never see the draft they keep rewriting, year after year, relationship after relationship, and calling it love. The day you stop romanticizing people isn't as peaceful as it sounds. Some days it will feel like clarity. Other days it will feel like grief with nowhere to go, because you can't unsee a pattern once you've seen it, and you can't unknow what you now know about the people closest to you. You start understanding why some conversations suddenly feel empty, why certain smiles feel rehearsed, why some people only ever loved the parts of you that were useful to them, and why, underneath almost every interaction, two people are quietly negotiating something neither of them will ever say out loud. But maybe the hardest realization isn't about them at all. Maybe it's this: the masks were never really the problem. The problem was believing they were permanent. Believing the good version was the real one, and the bad version was the exception, when most of the time they were simply two rooms in the same house. Human beings are contradictions, capable of loyalty and betrayal in the same year, compassion and cruelty in the same conversation, sometimes the same hour. And maybe growing up has nothing to do with age at all. Maybe it just begins the day you stop searching for a perfect person and start looking at the real one standing in front of you. Tired, contradictory, sometimes generous, sometimes small, exactly like you. Because the day you stop romanticizing people is also the day you stop needing them to complete the fantasy inside your own head. And once that fantasy is gone, it doesn't come back. Not fully, not ever again. That's the part nobody tells you before it happens. You don't get your innocence back once you've seen clearly. You only get something else instead. Quieter, harder, and somehow finally real. If this made you notice something about the people around you, or something about yourself you've been avoiding, leave the word aware in the comments. You already know why you're still watching.